I have arbitrated 4,006 trials inside the tessellate arena. I have watched a Korath warlord crack a stone the size of a transport in half with his bare hands. I have logged the threat rating of a creature from the burning shoals of Veth that ate its own handlers before the gate even opened. I have seen things that would make most of you stop sleeping. And I am telling you, the only time the Aegis ever screamed the word Omega, maximum threat, the highest classification we have, the one that locks every exit and floods the floor with kill gas if it has to, the only time in my entire career. It was pointing at a girl doing her homework. I should slow down. You won't believe me if I rush it. Let me tell you how the whole thing started, because the part that matters isn't the screaming. The part that matters is how quiet she was. You have to understand the Meridian Spire first. It's a station, a big one. It hangs in the dark between three star systems, and the species that built it died out so long ago that nobody even argues about who they were anymore. We just live in the bones of it. The Concordance runs the upper rings, the diplomats, the trade halls, the schools. And down in the gut of the station, where the gravity gets heavy and the air tastes like old metal, that's where the tessellate arena sits. I work the floor. My title is Threat Arbiter, third seat. What that means in plain language is that I sit in a glass booth above the sand, and I watch the Aegis do its work. And when something goes wrong, I'm the one who has to decide how badly. The Aegis is the thing I love and the thing I'm afraid of. It's the classification array. Old tech, older than the Concordance, salvaged out of the station's deep levels. Nobody fully understands it, which is a terrible thing to admit about a machine that can flood a room with poison, but there it is. You feed it a contestant. It reads them, not just their muscle and their reach and their weapons. It reads something underneath all that, their capacity. What they could do if everything went wrong, and they decided not to stop. Most fighters rate Tier 3. A tough one, Tier 2. In 4,000 trials, I've seen Tier 1 maybe a dozen times, and each one of those nights I went home and held my mate's hands and didn't say anything for a long while. Omega, the top, the absolute ceiling, that's theoretical. That's a number in a manual. We train for it the way you train for the station falling out of the sky. You learn the drill. You never expect to run it. So that's the room. Now let me put you in it on the day it happened. It was a slow afternoon. Qualifier rounds. Nothing important. The kind of fights where half-drained brawlers from the trade rings try to win enough credits to clear a debt. Boring work. I had 3 honest contestants logged and a 4th running late, and I was mostly watching the crowd, because the crowd on a slow day is funnier than the fights. The stands were maybe a third full. You had your usual mix. A cluster of Korath down low, big slab-shouldered things drinking and heckling. A row of Sethran spectators up high, those long pale folk who never cheer, just lean forward all at once like wind moving through grass. Vendors working the aisles with skewers of something that smelled like burnt sugar and engine grease. A pack of children, I don't know whose. Station kids always run loose down there, chasing each other along the back rail. And then 3 rows up from the floor, all by herself, sat the human. I noticed her because she wasn't watching the fights. Everyone watches the fights. That's the whole point of the room. But this one had a flat little device propped on her knees and a stylus in her hand, and she was writing. Head down. Tongue tucked into the corner of her mouth the way they do when they're concentrating. Every few moments she'd glance up at the arena, watch for a breath or two, and then go right back to scribbling. I'd seen humans before, not many of them out this far. They're a young species fresh into the Concordance, and most of the ones who reach the spire are students or junior trade clerks. Soft-looking, small teeth, easy to underestimate, and most of us did. This one was young even for them. A student, clearly. She had the look, that slightly rumpled, slightly broke, slightly stubborn look that students of every species wear. Dark hair pulled back hard out of her face. A bag at her feet with the strap chewed up. A patch sewn onto the shoulder of her jacket that I'd later learn was from the Concordance Exchange College, 3 rings up. I almost looked away. I want you to remember that. I almost just let my eyes move on because she was the least threatening thing in the entire building. Then the late contestant finally showed, and I had work to do, and I forgot all about her. Here's where it goes wrong, and the worst part is how small the start of it was. The fourth contestant was a no-show after all. He'd registered, paid his fee, and never come down. Happens all the time. The rule is simple: an empty slot has to be filled or refunded before the round can close, and refunds make the house lose money, so the floor staff do this thing they're not supposed to do. They scan the stands. They find a body. They offer it a small purse to step onto the sand for a single qualifying read, no fight, just a classification scan, in and out, easy credits. It's lazy. It's against 6 different regulations. And on a slow day with a bored crowd, the floor chief did exactly that. I watched him walk the aisle. I watched him stop at the human. I remember thinking, oh, that's cruel, leave the kid alone. He was pointing at the sand. She was shaking her head, holding up her device, mouthing something. I read it off her lips later from the recording. I have an assignment due. He kept talking. He must have mentioned the credits because she stopped. You could see the exact instant the number became interesting to her. Students. Same in every species. She looked at the sand. She looked at her device. She did a thing humans do where they puff air out and let their shoulders drop, this whole body sigh, and then she stood up, and she gathered her bag, and she still didn't put the device away. She carried it down to the floor with her, holding it against her chest like she was annoyed she had to interrupt her work to be classified. She stepped onto the sand, still holding her homework. I want to be clear about something. She was not a fighter. She had no weapon. She wasn't even wearing the right shoes. She walked out there the way you'd walk into a waiting room, checking the time, slightly inconvenienced. The floor chief gave the booth a lazy wave, the signal to run a quick read and clear the slot. I keyed the aegis. Routine. I'd done it 10,000 times. The array hummed up, that low note you feel in your back teeth. And the focusing rings swung around to point at the small, dark-haired girl, standing in the middle of 40 meters of sand, with a device pressed to her sternum. And then it started reading her. And then it kept reading her. A normal read takes about 2 seconds. The number comes up. The slot clears. Everyone goes home. This read went 4 seconds. Then 6. The hum, which is supposed to settle, didn't settle. It climbed. I'd never heard it climb before. It went up the way a voice goes up when something is scaring it, and I felt it in my teeth and then in my chest, and I looked at my display and the threat number was moving. It was supposed to land on a value and stop. Tier 4, probably, for a student. Maybe Tier 5 if she did something athletic on weekends. The number went past 4. Then 3. I actually laughed this nervous bark because that was absurd. A human kid getting a Tier 3 meant the array was glitching. I should pull the read and recalibrate. My hand was already moving to the abort key. The number hit 2. The crowd noise changed. Up in the stands they'd started to notice the sound. The chorus stopped heckling. The Sethran leaned forward all at once, that grass-in-the-wind motion, and there's nothing in the universe that puts a chill down my spine faster than a whole row of Sethran getting interested at the same time. The number hit 1. My hand froze over the abort key. I have never in my life seen a Tier 1 read come up live, and I was looking at 1, and it was a girl who flinched at the sound the machine was making and looked up at my booth like, "Is this normal? This doesn't feel normal." It was not normal. I want that on record. None of what happened that day was normal. The number did not stop at 1. The Aegis made a sound I had only ever heard in the drill simulator. A sound I had half convinced myself wasn't even real. A sound the manual just calls the alarm of last resort. And the whole array seized up bright and hard. And across the top of my display, across every display in the building, across the great curved screen above the arena where the crowd reads the odds, one word came up in the old dead language of the station's builders. And then, helpfully, in every language we speak. You have to picture it from the stands, because that's where the panic lived. One moment it's a slow afternoon, a bored crowd, a no-show fight. The next, the whole room is bathed in that ugly red the station only uses for the air is about to try to kill you. The heavy doors are slamming down with that final boom that you feel in your sternum. And the biggest word in the building is hanging over the head of a 130-something-pound human student, who is now looking around at all of this with an expression I can only describe as deeply, personally inconvenienced. A chorus down in the front row stood up so fast he knocked his whole bench over. Somebody screamed. A vendor dropped a tray and skewers went everywhere and nobody even looked at them, which tells you how scared people were, because down here free food does not hit the ground unclaimed. And the kid did the thing that I have thought about every single day since. She didn't run. There was nowhere to run, but she didn't even try. She didn't drop into a stance. She didn't reach for a weapon she didn't have. She looked up at the giant red word about her, and she looked down at the device still clutched to her chest, and she said, and the floor mics caught this, it's on the record, I've played it back more times than I'll admit. She said, in a small flat voice with absolutely no fear in it, only the bottomless exhaustion of a person whose day has gotten worse. I really just need to finish my homework. Now, in the booth, I had a decision to make and I had it fast. Omega Protocol is not a suggestion. Omega Protocol says, contain the threat by any means, including lethal flooding of the arena floor. The kill gas is already pressurized in lines under the sand. All I have to do is hold my palm flat on the plate for 3 seconds and the floor turns into a tomb, and the room is safe, and the Aegis stops screaming, and I file a report and go home. That's the protocol. That's what the manual would have me do to a tier Omega. I looked at the floor. I looked at the threat. The threat was a girl wiping her nose on the back of her wrist and squinting up at me like she was trying to figure out who was in charge so she could ask them to please turn the alarm off. I am not a brave person. I want to be honest with you about that. I've spent my career on the safe side of glass. But I have read enough creatures in my life to know the difference between a thing that wants to hurt you and a thing that just wants to be left alone. And every instinct I had, every single one, against 4,000 trials of training, was screaming that the machine was wrong. So I did the thing that should have ended my career. I did not put my palm on the plate. I leaned into the mic instead, and with the whole room frozen in red light, and 100 panicked faces, and one dead-tired human standing in the middle of it, I keyed the floor channel and I said, stay calm, stay where you are. Nobody is going to hurt you. And I will be honest, I wasn't sure if I was talking to the crowd or to her or to the machine. I told you the part that matters isn't the screaming. Here's the part that matters. While the whole tessellate arena lost its mind around her, that girl set her bag down on the sand. Slowly, carefully, like she didn't want to scuff the screen. She crouched and she tucked her device into the bag and she zipped it shut, and only then did she straighten up and put both her empty hands out where everyone could see them. She didn't do it because anybody told her to. She did it before I said a word. She just looked at a room full of terrified strangers and understood, all on her own, that the kindest thing she could do for them right then was to make herself look harmless. That's when I stopped trusting the number and started watching the girl. Because the machine was right about one thing. There was something dangerous in that room. It just wasn't her. I need to back up about 90 seconds, because there's a thing I left out, and I left it out on purpose so you'd feel it the way I felt it. When the Aegis seized up and threw Omega across every screen in the building, it did one other thing. Something it's designed to do that nobody ever sees because nobody ever triggers it. An Omega reading doesn't just lock the exits. It opens something too. Down in the deep level below the sand, there's a containment vault. It's where the arena keeps the contestants that are too dangerous to walk in through the front gate, the ones that arrive sedated, in shielded transports and never leave. The vault is sealed by the same old machine that runs the Aegis. They're wired together, builder tech, salvaged as one system. And nobody alive understands why. And the logic buried in that dead language, the logic none of us could read, said this. If a threat of the highest order appears on the floor, release everything we have to meet it. The machine read a girl with homework as the highest order of threat. So the machine opened the vault. I didn't know that yet. In the booth, all I knew was that the floor had locked, the alarm was screaming, and I just refused a direct protocol to flood the sand. I was watching the human stand there with her hands open, and I was thinking maybe, I just made the right call, the room would settle, I could talk everyone down. Then the floor under the sand groaned. It's a sound I'd felt twice before, both times in maintenance drills, and both times it had scared the breath out of me. The great iris in the center of the arena floor, the gate the worst things come up through, was unlocking. Sand began to pour down into a widening black circle right behind the girl, and she felt it move under her shoes and turned around. And for the first time all afternoon, something crossed her face that wasn't tiredness. Up out of the dark came the thing the arena had been too afraid to ever let fight. I'd seen its file. We called it the Hollow. It came from a world that doesn't have a name anymore, only coordinates, because everything that could have named it is gone. It was long and low and the color of a bad bruise, and it moved wrong, too many joints, folding and unfolding like a hand closing, and where its face should have been there was just a smooth concavity, a dish, that turned toward sound. It had killed its capture team. It had killed the team sent to recover the first team. It had been in that vault, sedated and sealed, for 19 years, because nobody could figure out how to kill it without losing more people than it was worth. And the machine had just set it loose, 12 meters behind a 19-year-old college student, because the machine genuinely believed she was the more dangerous of the two. The crowd noise stopped, just stopped, a whole arena holding its breath at once. Here's the thing about that moment that I can't get across no matter how I tell it. The girl was scared. I could see it now, finally, plain on her face. Her hands had started to shake. Her breath had gone fast and shallow. She was a kid alone on a floor she'd been bribed onto, looking at a thing out of a nightmare she'd never even been warned existed. And she was scared, and she did not fall apart. That's the whole thing. That's the entire secret of them, and I'd spent my career not understanding it. I'd read 1,000 species off that sand. The strong ones, the fast ones, the ones with armor and venom and reach. And the machine had read all of them too and called them Tier 3, Tier 2, and called this soft, weaponless, terrified child Omega, and I finally understood why, and understanding it put a cold weight in my stomach that's never fully gone away. The Aegis doesn't measure power. I'd had it wrong for 4,000 trials. It measures capacity, what a thing could do if everything went wrong and it decided not to stop. And every other creature in the universe, when everything goes wrong, eventually stops, runs out, gives up, lies down. There's a floor under their fear. The machine looked at the human and could not find the floor. That's what it was screaming about, not her muscles. The bottomless, stubborn, unreasonable thing underneath, the thing that does not have an off switch, the thing that says I really just need to finish my homework with a nightmare unfolding out of the dark behind it. The machine had been built by people who had clearly met something like us once, long ago, and built a vault deep enough that they hoped they'd never have to again. The Hollow turned its dish toward the girl. And the girl, instead of running, did the most human thing I have ever witnessed. She started talking to it. "Hey," she said, soft, hands still up, backing away one slow step at a time. "Hey, okay, you're okay." It's nonsense. It's noise. She knew it couldn't understand her. Nobody knew if the thing understood anything. But humans do this. When they're terrified, when there's nothing left, they reach for the voice they'd use on a frightened animal, because somewhere underneath the panic they've decided that the thing in front of them might be scared too and might be reachable and is owed at least the chance. The Hollow's dish tracked her voice. It came up out of the gate the rest of the way, all of it, far bigger than the file had made it sound, and it folded toward her. She kept her voice level. "You've been down there a long time, huh? Step back. I know, it's bright up here. Step back." Her heel hit the low wall at the edge of the floor and she had nowhere left to go, and the thing was close enough now that I could see her reflection warped across the smooth dish of its face. "I'm not gonna hurt you," she said to the apex predator, and she almost laughed, this cracked little sound, like I even could. And then her hand, the one she'd been holding up, slow and open, moved sideways just slightly, toward her bag, toward the bag she'd set down so carefully on the sand, the bag that was now between her and the hollow. I thought she was reaching for a weapon. I'd misread her one more time, right at the end. She wasn't reaching for a weapon. She was reaching for her homework. Let me tell you what was on that device, because this is the part the official record almost left out, and I made them put it back. She was an acoustics student. Exchange College, 3 rings up. Her assignment, the one that was due, the one she'd been so desperate to finish that she'd carried it onto the floor of a death arena, was a field study on resonance. Sound. How different materials and shapes catch a frequency and ring with it or kill it dead. She'd come down to the arena in the first place because the old builder stone of the deep levels has acoustic properties she couldn't get anywhere else on the station. And she'd been sitting in the stands recording the room, mapping how the noise of the crowd moved through the bones of the place, when the floor chief found her. She had a recording device. She had a directional emitter for testing reflections. And she had on her screen a half-finished map of every resonant frequency in that arena, including the deep, low, structural ones. The ones you feel in your teeth. The ones the Aegis hums at. The hollow's face wasn't a face. It was a dish. It turned toward sound because sound was how it saw. She'd figured it out in the time it took to back across a room. I've watched the footage frame by frame and I still don't know how, except that I think when humans are about to die they don't get slower, they get faster. Some terrible clarity comes down over them. She looked at the thing reading her by sound. And she looked at the emitter in her bag loaded with every frequency in the room. And she did the arithmetic of her own survival in about 2 seconds. She got the bag open. She pulled the emitter free. The hollow lunged fast, horribly fast, the whole long body uncoiling, and she didn't flinch and she didn't run. She found the frequency. She'd mapped it that very afternoon. The deep structural resonance of the builder stone, the one the whole vault was tuned to, the one that had probably been the last thing the hollow heard for 19 years before they sealed the door. She dialed her little student emitter to it and held it up like a shield made of nothing. And she opened it up full into the dish of that thing's face from less than a meter away. The sound hit it like a wall. I've never seen anything like what happened to the hollow. It didn't die. She didn't kill it. A student with a homework emitter can't kill a thing that took capture teams. But the frequency she'd found was the one that ran through its whole world, its whole vault, its whole sealed life. And when it hit the creature, it just folded. All those joints closed at once. It dropped to the sand and curled in on itself, the long body wrapping tight, the dish tucked away, and it went still. Not dead. Just gone somewhere deep inside itself, somewhere the sound couldn't reach, the way you'd cover your ears and squeeze your eyes shut and wait for a thing to be over. She'd scared it. That's all. She'd found the one sound in the universe that meant the door is sealing again to a creature that had spent 19 years in the dark. And she'd played it, and the most dangerous thing the arena owned curled up on the floor like it wanted its mother. She held the emitter on it, both hands, shaking now, really shaking, the adrenaline catching up with her all at once. She didn't lower it. She didn't celebrate. She just stood there, this small soak-through exhausted kid, keeping a steady wall of sound between herself and the nightmare, and she looked up at my booth through the red light, and she said the second thing the floor mics caught. The thing that's carved into the wall of the Arbiter's Hall now, the thing I'll hear in my own voice when I'm old. Can somebody please help me? I don't know how long my battery lasts. I put my palm on the plate. Not the kill gas. The other thing, the override I'm not technically supposed to be able to reach, the manual recovery that drops the iris gate and reseals the vault by hand. I'd never used it. I wasn't even sure it would work. I held my palm down and I prayed to nobody in particular, and the floor groaned again and the great black circle opened back up under the curled, sound-stunned creature. And it slid down into the dark it came from, still folded, still hiding, and the iris ground shut over it. And then it was just a girl alone on the sand, holding a dead battery emitter in two shaking hands, with the alarm finally dying down around her. The room didn't cheer. I want you to know that. There was no roar, no chant, nothing like the way the crowd carries on when a real fighter wins. The tessellate arena, which has cheered for blood my entire life, went absolutely silent for the human student, because every single creature in those stands had just watched something they didn't have a name for, and you don't cheer for that. You go quiet. The Sethran all stood up at once, the whole pale row of them, which I'd never seen, not once, not for anyone. The exits unlocked with a sound like the whole station exhaling. She put the emitter down on the sand. She picked up her bag. She checked, I swear to you, she checked that her device hadn't cracked when she'd yanked it out, turning it over in the red light. And then she just walked off the floor, up the steps, through the gate, past 100 staring faces and a row of standing Sethran and a Korath warlord who got out of her way. The floor chief, the one who dragged her down there, was standing at the gate white as a sheet. As she passed him, she stopped. She looked at him. And she said the third thing, the only thing she said to another person the whole time, and the mics barely caught it, but they caught it. You still owe me the credits. They did pay her in the end. It was the least of what they owed her. There was an inquiry, of course. There's always an inquiry. And I lost my third seat for refusing the flood protocol. And then I got it back 2 months later when the panel finished watching the footage and understood that if I'd put my palm on the plate the way the manual said, I'd have gassed the only person in the building capable of stopping what came up out of the floor. They changed the protocols after that. Omega doesn't open the vault anymore. Somebody finally went down into the deep levels and severed the link the builders had wired, the link none of us understood. The one that had decided the right answer to a sufficiently dangerous thing was to throw every other dangerous thing at it. We'd been one bad reading away from that for my entire career and never known it. The girl finished her degree. I checked. She submitted her acoustics assignment 4 days late with a note and got top marks, and there's a small bitter joke in there that the thing she'd been so frantic to finish on time was the one part of that whole day that ran behind schedule. She doesn't do interviews. She turned down the medal. The one statement she ever gave, when a concordance reporter cornered her in a transit hall, was 11 words long, and I think about it more than I think about almost anything else. They asked her how she beat a creature that had killed capture teams, how a student with no weapon survived a maximum threat. And she looked at the reporter, this tired young human with a chewed-up bag strap, and she said, I didn't beat it, I just didn't have anywhere to be. I've arbitrated another 2,000 trials since that day. I'm first seat now. I'll retire soon. And new arbiters come up through the booth, young ones, and they always ask me the same thing, because everybody's heard the story and nobody believes the part that matters. They ask me, what was the most dangerous thing you ever saw on the sand? And they expect me to say the hollow, or the Korath warlord, or the creature from the burning shoals that ate its handlers. I tell them the truth. The most dangerous thing I ever saw was a frightened kid who decided she wasn't done yet. No claws, no armor, no reach. Just a soft, stubborn, bottomless refusal to lie down, the one thing in all my years the machine ever looked at and couldn't find the bottom of. We spend so long out here measuring how hard a thing can hit. The humans taught me to be afraid of something quieter. They don't stop.